The notification sound from Jake's laptop made my heart stop cold. I was supposed to be grabbing his charger from his home office while he showered, but the email preview that flashed across his screen made my hands shake as I read the words. Final payment confirmation for Thompson Blake wedding ceremony, Lake Travis Resort, Saturday, May 18th. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Emma Rodriguez, and May 18th was supposed to be my wedding day. But apparently Jake Thompson had other plans. Plans that involved someone named Blake. Standing in that home office, staring at an email that shattered my entire world, I felt something shift inside me. Most people might have confronted their cheating fiancé immediately, screaming and crying and demanding explanations. But I'm a digital marketing specialist who spent the last 7 years building online campaigns, tracking consumer behavior, and uncovering the truth behind carefully constructed social media personas. My instincts told me to investigate first, react later. I quickly photographed the email with my phone before it disappeared from the preview window. My hands were surprisingly steady, considering my heart was hammering against my ribs. Jake was still singing off-key in the shower down the hall, completely oblivious that his entire deception had just been exposed by a poorly timed email notification. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jake had always teased me about being too attached to technology, about always having my phone in hand, about my job revolving around meaningless social media stuff. Now that same technological savviness was about to become his worst nightmare. I closed his laptop carefully, grabbed the charger I'd originally come for, and walked back to our shared bedroom with my mind racing. Jake emerged from the bathroom moments later, towel wrapped around his waist, water droplets still clinging to his shoulders. He looked exactly like the man I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago. The same warm brown eyes, the same easy smile that had first caught my attention at a mutual friend's housewarming party. "Find the charger okay, babe?" he asked, running another towel through his dark hair. "Yeah, no problem," I replied, my voice somehow remaining normal despite the tsunami of emotions crashing through me. "Your laptop kept pinging with notifications, though." Seemed like important work stuff. I watched his face carefully, looking for any telltale sign of panic or guilt. But Jake just shrugged, completely unbothered. "Probably just spam, you know how it is." This was the man I'd been planning to marry in 6 weeks, the man I'd spent countless hours with choosing flowers, tasting cakes, and debating invitation designs, the man who'd proposed to me on the rooftop of our favorite restaurant in downtown Austin, telling me I was the only woman he could ever imagine spending his life with, the man who was apparently planning a completely different wedding with someone else. "I'm gonna make some coffee," I said, needing space to think. "Want some?" "Actually, I've got to head out," Jake replied, pulling clothes from our shared dresser. "Kevin wants to meet about the Westlake property. You know how these wealthy clients are. Everything's an emergency." Kevin Ross was Jake's business partner at their luxury real estate firm. They specialized in high-end properties around Austin, catering to tech executives and oil money families who wanted sprawling lakefront estates. Jake had been working more and more weekend meetings lately, always with vague explanations about demanding clients and time-sensitive deals. Now I wondered how many of those weekend meetings were actually real. "Will you be back for dinner?" I asked, still playing the role of the unsuspecting fiancé. "Probably late," he said, kissing my forehead in the casual way that had once made me feel cherished. Now it felt like a mockery. "Don't wait up." The moment Jake left, I opened my laptop and began doing what I do best: digital investigation. Working in marketing had taught me how to research target demographics, track online behavior, and piece together comprehensive profiles from seemingly unrelated digital breadcrumbs. I'd used these skills professionally for years, but never imagined I'd be turning them on my own fiancé. I started with the email address that had sent the payment confirmation. It belonged to Lake Travis Resort, an upscale wedding venue about 30 minutes outside Austin. Their website showed elegant lakefront ceremonies, luxury accommodations, and the kind of picture-perfect settings that appeared in bridal magazines. The kind of venue Jake and I had looked at months ago, before deciding it was outside our budget. Apparently, it wasn't outside his budget when he was planning a wedding with someone else. Next, I searched for Thompson Blake wedding across every social media platform I could think of. Most people couldn't resist sharing details about their upcoming nuptials online, especially if one of them was active on social media. It didn't take long before I found what I was looking for. Madison Blake's Instagram account was a carefully curated collection of yoga poses, green smoothie recipes, and inspirational quotes about living your best life. She had about 50,000 followers and the kind of effortlessly gorgeous look that made regular people feel inadequate about their own lives. Blonde hair, perfect skin, toned abs prominently displayed in sports bras and leggings, usually photographed at trendy Austin fitness studios or scenic outdoor locations. What made my stomach drop was scrolling back through her posts over the past 6 months. There, hidden among the wellness content and sponsored posts for protein powder, were subtle hints of a relationship. A coffee cup for two at Radio Coffee. A hiking photo with someone's masculine hand visible at the edge of the frame. A dinner table set for two at Yuchi, one of Austin's most exclusive restaurants. But it was the post from 2 weeks ago that made me feel physically sick. Madison had shared a photo of a diamond ring resting on a yoga mat, with the caption, "Sometimes the universe has better plans than we ever imagined. Grateful for unexpected love and new beginnings." The ring was beautiful, classic, and expensive looking. It was also nothing like the vintage-style engagement ring currently sitting on my left hand. I screenshot everything, creating a digital evidence folder on my desktop. My marketing training had taught me the importance of documentation, and my instincts told me I was going to need proof of everything I discovered. The next step was finding the connection between Jake and Madison. Based on her social media, she was a yoga instructor and wellness influencer, but she also tagged herself frequently at various upscale fitness studios around Austin. One name kept appearing: Elite Fitness, a high-end gym in the same trendy district where Jake's real estate office was located. I'd never heard Jake mention Elite Fitness specifically, but he had been working out more frequently lately. He'd told me he was using the gym at his office building, trying to get in shape for our wedding. Now I wondered if he'd been getting in shape for a different wedding entirely. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Tyler Chen. We'd been friends since college, and he was one of the few people who knew me well enough to sense when something was wrong. "Coffee later? You seemed off when we talked yesterday." I stared at the message, debating whether to confide in him. Tyler was a graphic designer with his own small studio, and he'd always been protective of me in the way that good friends are. He'd never been Jake's biggest fan, though he'd tried to hide it out of loyalty to me. Tyler had once mentioned that something about Jake seemed too polished, like he was always performing rather than being genuine. At the time, I dismissed Tyler's concerns as overprotectiveness. Now I wondered if his instincts had been better than mine. "Yes, definitely need coffee. Can you meet at Café Medici on Guadalupe in an hour?" "Already on my way." Tyler was waiting when I arrived, his laptop open and working on what looked like a website design for a local band. He looked up as I approached, his expression immediately shifting to concern when he saw my face. "Okay, what happened?" he asked without preamble. "You look like someone died." I sat down across from him, ordering a double-shot espresso. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. From the server. "I think Jake is planning to marry someone else." Tyler's hands froze over his keyboard. "What do you mean, someone else?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I'd taken. The payment confirmation email, Madison's Instagram posts, the engagement ring photo. Tyler scrolled through everything in silence, his expression growing darker with each image. "Emma, this is—" he started, then stopped. "Are you absolutely sure this is what it looks like?" "What else could it be?" I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "He's planning a wedding for the same date as ours, with another woman, at a venue we couldn't afford. The evidence is pretty clear." Tyler set down my phone and leaned forward. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" That was the question I'd been asking myself for the past 2 hours. The logical part of my brain said to confront Jake immediately, demand an explanation, and end our relationship. But the professional part of my brain, The part that had built successful marketing campaigns by understanding human psychology and strategic planning was telling me something different. "I'm going to investigate," I said finally. "I want to know everything. How long this has been going on, how elaborate his deception is, whether other people know about it. I want the complete picture before I decide how to handle it." Tyler nodded slowly. "You want to approach this like a marketing campaign. Research the target, understand the competition, plan your strategy." Exactly. Jake thinks he's outsmarted me, that I'm too trusting or too naive to discover his lies. He has no idea that investigating people's online behavior is literally what I do for a living. What can I do to help? I'd hoped Tyler would offer. While I was skilled at digital research, Tyler had connections throughout Austin's creative community that could prove useful. His graphic design work had introduced him to event planners, photographers, venue coordinators, and other wedding industry professionals. I need to know more about this Madison Blake, her background, her connections, how she met Jake, and I need to find out details about their wedding plans without alerting anyone that I'm looking. Tyler was already pulling up Madison's Instagram on his laptop. Madison Blake, yoga instructor and influencer. This is gonna sound terrible, but she looks like exactly the type of woman Jake would be attracted to. What's that supposed to mean? You know I love you, but Jake has always been image conscious. His job, his clothes, his car, even his choice of restaurants. Everything is about how it looks to other people. Madison here looks like a trophy wife in training. I studied Madison's photos more carefully. Tyler wasn't wrong. Every image was perfectly lit, professionally composed, and designed to project an aspirational lifestyle. This was someone who understood the power of personal branding, who had built her entire identity around being enviable. "Look at this," Tyler said, pointing to a recent post. "She's tagged at Elite Fitness, and there's a guy in the background who looks familiar." I leaned closer to examine the photo. Madison was demonstrating a yoga pose in what appeared to be the gym's group fitness studio. In the background, slightly out of focus, was a man using weight equipment who did indeed look familiar. It was Brad Wilson, Jake's best friend and workout partner, which meant Jake definitely knew about Elite Fitness and had probably been lying about where he was exercising. "Brad introduced them," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "That's how they met." Tyler continued scrolling through Madison's posts. "There's something else here. Look at the dates of her relationship hints compared to when she started posting from Austin locations." I examined the timeline Tyler was tracking. 6 months ago, Madison's posts had been primarily from Dallas, where she appeared to be living and working. Then, gradually, more and more of her content started featuring Austin locations. The hiking trails, the restaurants, the fitness studios. The shift coincided almost exactly with when the subtle relationship hints began appearing. She moved here for him, I realized. Jake was either traveling to Dallas to see her, or they met when she was visiting Austin, and then she relocated to be closer to him. "Which means this isn't a casual affair," Tyler said grimly. "This is a planned relationship. She uprooted her life to be with him." The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a spontaneous attraction that had gotten out of hand. Jake had been systematically building a relationship with another woman while maintaining our engagement. He'd been living a double life for months, possibly longer. My phone rang, interrupting my spiral of thoughts. Jake's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, babe," I answered, proud of how normal I sounded. "Hey, the meeting with Kevin is running longer than expected. I probably won't be home until late tonight. Are you okay? You sound a little off." "Just tired," I lied. "Long day at work." "Get some rest. Love you." "Love you too." I hung up, feeling sick at how easily the words had come. Tyler was watching me with a mixture of sympathy and anger. "He's probably with her right now," I said. "Most likely. The question is, do you want to confirm that?" I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to drive to Elite Fitness and see if Jake's car was in the parking lot. Part of me wanted to show up at Madison's apartment and confront them both. But the strategic part of my brain knew that premature action would only give them a chance to cover their tracks or prepare better lies. "Not yet," I decided. "I need more information first. I want to understand the scope of this deception before I make any moves. Tyler closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. Emma, I have to ask this. Are you sure you want to dig deeper? Sometimes ignorance really is bliss. You could just end things with Jake and move on without having to know all the painful details. I considered his question seriously. It would be easier to simply break up with Jake and start over. But something inside me rebelled against that option. Maybe it was professional pride, or maybe it was a need for justice, but I couldn't stand the idea of Jake getting away with his elaborate deception without consequences. He made me complicit in my own humiliation, I said finally. For months I've been planning a wedding, choosing flowers, addressing invitations, excited about a future that was built on lies. He let me make a fool of myself while he was planning a completely different life with someone else. That deserves consequences. Tyler nodded. Okay. Then we're doing this properly. What's the plan? I pulled out my notebook and started making a list. In marketing, successful campaigns required careful planning, target analysis, and strategic execution. This situation would be no different. First, I need to map out their relationship timeline. When they met, how serious it is, who else knows about it. Second, I need details about their wedding plans. Venue, date, guest list, vendors. Third, I need to understand Jake's psychology. Is he planning to leave me for her, or is he trying to maintain both relationships? And fourth, Tyler prompted. Fourth, I decide how to expose him in the most devastating way possible. Over the next 2 hours, Tyler and I developed a comprehensive investigation strategy. He would use his connections in the wedding industry to gather information about the Thompson-Blake ceremony without arousing suspicion. I would continue my digital research while maintaining my normal routine with Jake. The most challenging part would be acting natural around my fiancé while knowing what I knew. But I'd spent years in marketing presentations, pitching campaigns to skeptical clients, and maintaining professional composure under pressure. I could certainly manage to fool Jake for a few more weeks. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Tyler grabbed my arm gently. Promise me something. Whatever you discover, whatever you decide to do about it, don't let this change who you are. Don't let Jake's betrayal turn you into someone bitter or vengeful. I appreciated Tyler's concern, but I thought he was missing something important. This isn't about becoming vengeful. This is about protecting myself and making sure Jake faces consequences for his actions. He made the choice to deceive me. I'm just choosing not to let him get away with it. That evening I sat in our shared apartment, watching Jake move around the kitchen preparing dinner as if nothing had changed. He was making pasta with marinara sauce, one of the simple dishes he'd mastered when we first started dating. He hummed while he cooked, occasionally looking over to smile at me as I worked on my laptop. To any outside observer, we looked like a happy couple enjoying a quiet evening together. Jake had no idea that I was systematically documenting his lies, building a case against him with the same methodical approach I used for client campaigns. My laptop screen showed multiple browser tabs: Madison Blake's social media profiles, elite fitness class schedules, Lake Travis Resort wedding packages, and a growing spreadsheet where I was tracking every piece of evidence I discovered. "What are you working on?" Jake asked, setting a plate of pasta in front of me. "Just some research for the Morrison account," I replied smoothly. The Morrison account was a real client, a luxury hotel chain that wanted to target affluent travelers. It was the perfect cover story because it required exactly the kind of demographic research I was actually doing. "You work too much," Jake said, settling beside me on the couch with his own plate. "Maybe after the wedding you can take some time off. We could do that European honeymoon we talked about." I forced myself to smile and nod, even as I wondered whether Jake was planning a European honeymoon with me or with Madison Blake. The casual way he mentioned our future together made my skin crawl, but I maintained my facade. "That sounds perfect," I said. Later that night, after Jake had fallen asleep, I continued my investigation. I'd learned that Madison taught yoga classes at Elite Fitness 3 times a week, always in the evenings when Jake claimed to be working late. I'd also discovered that she had a close relationship with her sister, Ashley Blake, who worked as an event planner and frequently appeared in Madison's social media posts. Most interesting of all, I'd found evidence that Jake and Madison had been planning their relationship much more carefully than I'd initially realized. Madison's move from Dallas to Austin hadn't been spontaneous. She'd been posting about exciting new opportunities and fresh starts for weeks before the relocation, building anticipation among her followers for a major life change. This was a woman who understood personal branding and narrative construction. She was documenting her relationship with Jake for her social media audience, turning their romance into content that would boost her influencer status. The realization that I was dealing with two people who were not only betraying me but also potentially profiting from that betrayal sparked something fierce inside me. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was about justice, about ensuring that actions had consequences, about preventing them from doing this to someone else in the future. As I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, lying next to the man who was planning to marry another woman in 6 weeks, I felt something I hadn't expected: anticipation. Jake and Madison thought they were playing a game where only they knew the rules. They had no idea that I was about to change the entire playing field. Tomorrow, the real investigation would begin. The next morning brought a text from Jake that made my stomach churn with its casual normalcy. Running early client meeting. Coffee's ready for you. Love you, beautiful. I found the coffee waiting as promised, along with a handwritten note that read, "Can't wait to marry you in 5 weeks," with a small heart drawn at the bottom. The same handwriting that had probably signed contracts for his secret wedding venue. My phone buzzed with a response to the message I'd sent Rachel Moore at 6 in the morning. Rachel had been my college roommate before she became a detective with the Austin Police Department, and she was one of the few people I trusted completely. Free for lunch today. Sounds like you need to talk. I spent the morning at my office trying to maintain focus on actual work, but my mind kept drifting to the investigation. My colleague Stephanie noticed my distraction during our team meeting about the Morrison Hotel campaign. "Earth to Emma," she said, as I stared blankly at the presentation screen. "We were asking about your research on luxury travel demographics," I snapped back to attention, pulling up the legitimate research I'd actually completed between bouts of investigating my fiancé's double life. The target demographic shows strong preference for authentic experiences over traditional luxury markers. They want exclusivity but with personal meaning rather than just expensive amenities. The irony of discussing authentic experiences while living in a completely fabricated relationship wasn't lost on me. Rachel was waiting at Lucy's Fried Chicken on South Lamar when I arrived for lunch. She'd chosen a corner booth away from other diners, her detective instincts automatically selecting a location where we could talk privately. Rachel had the sharp, observant eyes that made her excellent at her job, and she was studying my face before I even sat down. "You look like hell," she said without preamble. "What's going on?" I pulled out my phone and showed her everything I'd discovered. The payment confirmation email, Madison's social media posts, the timeline of their relationship, the evidence of Jake's lies about his whereabouts. Rachel examined each screenshot methodically, her expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence. "This is comprehensive documentation," she said finally. "You've been thorough. It's what I do professionally. Research, analysis, pattern recognition." Rachel set down my phone and leaned back in the booth. "Emma, I have to ask this as your friend, and as someone who deals with domestic situations professionally. Are you safe? Do you have any concerns about Jake's reaction when this comes out?" The question surprised me. I'd been so focused on the betrayal and deception that I hadn't considered whether Jake might become dangerous when confronted. "I don't think so. Jake's never been violent or even particularly aggressive. He's more the type to lie and manipulate than to lose his temper." "Good, but keep that assessment fluid. People can react unpredictably when their carefully constructed lies collapse. Now, what exactly do you want to accomplish here?" I've been asking myself the same question since yesterday. I want him to face real consequences for what he's done. Not just losing me, but facing public accountability for his deception. He's been playing games with people's lives, making fools of everyone who cares about him. Rachel nodded. Understandable. But I need you to be strategic about this. What you've shown me suggests Jake is skilled at deception and manipulation. If you move too fast or too emotionally, he'll find ways to turn the situation around and make you look like the unstable one. What do you mean? Think about it from his perspective. If confronted, he could claim Madison is just a friend, that the wedding venue booking is for someone else, that you're being paranoid and jealous. Without concrete proof of the romantic relationship, you might end up looking like the crazy ex-fiancé who couldn't handle normal friendships. Rachel was right, and it frustrated me that Jake's manipulation was sophisticated enough to require counter-manipulation. So what do you suggest? More evidence. You need proof of the romantic relationship, preferably in his own words. You need witnesses who can verify his deception. And you need to understand his endgame. Is he planning to leave you for her? Or is he trying to maintain both relationships indefinitely? The thought of Jake attempting to stay engaged to me while marrying Madison made me physically nauseous. How could he possibly think he could maintain both relationships? You'd be surprised what people convince themselves they can get away with. Especially people who are already skilled at compartmentalizing their lives. Rachel pulled out her own phone and started taking notes. Let me help you approach this systematically. First, we need to verify the details of this other wedding. You've found the venue booking, but we need guest lists, vendor contracts, marriage license applications. How would we get access to that information? Leave that to me. I have contacts in various city departments. Marriage licenses are public records, and I can make some discreet inquiries about the wedding venue. Rachel paused. But Emma, I need you to promise me something. Whatever we discover, whatever plan we develop, we do this legally and safely. No breaking and entering, no unauthorized access to private accounts, no vigilante justice. I agreed, though part of me wondered if legal and safe would be sufficient to expose Jake's elaborate deception. That afternoon, I decided to take a more direct approach to gathering intelligence. Instead of relying solely on digital research, I would visit Elite Fitness and see what I could learn about Madison Blake in person. Elite Fitness occupied the ground floor of a sleek building in Austin's trendy East Side. The interior was all polished concrete, exposed brick, and expensive equipment. This wasn't a basic gym. This was a lifestyle brand that catered to Austin's affluent young professionals who wanted to look good while working out. I purchased a day pass and asked about yoga classes, specifically mentioning that a friend had recommended Madison Blake as an instructor. The young man at the front desk brightened immediately. Oh, Madison's amazing. She teaches our evening flow classes on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Really popular instructor, always packed classes. Has she been teaching here long? About 6 months, I think. She moved here from Dallas and joined our team pretty quickly. The members love her approach to wellness and mindfulness. 6 months. Exactly the timeline I'd constructed from her social media posts. I spent an hour exploring the gym, noting the layout and observing the clientele. These were definitely Jake's type of people. Well-dressed, professionally successful, image-conscious. The type who would appreciate Madison's Instagram-perfect aesthetic and lifestyle brand. As I was leaving, I noticed a bulletin board near the entrance, covered with flyers for various classes and events. Mixed among the announcements for nutrition workshops and personal training sessions was a small card that made my heart race. Blake Event Planning, making your special day perfect. Contact Ashley Blake for weddings, parties, and corporate events. Ashley Blake. Madison's sister, the event planner I'd identified in my research. She was apparently soliciting business from Elite Fitness members, which suggested she was actively involved in Austin's social scene. I photographed the card and left the gym with a new lead to pursue. That evening, Jake returned home in an unusually good mood. He was humming as he walked through the door, carrying flowers and a bottle of wine. "What's the occasion?" I asked, accepting the bouquet of pink roses. "Do I need an occasion to celebrate my beautiful fiancé?" he replied, kissing my cheek. "I just had a great day and wanted to share it with you." The flowers were beautiful, but all I could think about was whether he'd given Madison Blake flowers recently as well. How was your day? The meeting with Kevin went well. Actually, we landed the Henderson account, that massive lake house property we've been pursuing for months. It's going to be a huge commission. Jake's excitement seemed genuine, but then everything about Jake seemed genuine until you knew to look for the lies underneath. That's wonderful, honey. You've been working so hard on that deal. It means we'll have more flexibility for wedding expenses too. Maybe we can upgrade some of the details you wanted. The casual way he mentioned wedding expenses while secretly planning a different wedding made me want to scream. Instead, I smiled and suggested we celebrate with the wine he'd brought. As Jake opened the bottle and told me more details about the Henderson property sale, I found myself studying him with new eyes. How did someone become so comfortable with elaborate deception? Was this a recent development? Or had Jake always been capable of this level of manipulation? The thought led me to consider Rachel's suggestion about understanding his endgame. If Jake was planning to marry Madison while still engaged to me, there had to be a reason beyond simple indecision. People who constructed elaborate deceptions usually had specific goals in mind. Later that night, while Jake slept beside me, I continued my research into Ashley Blake event planning. Her business website showcased elegant weddings and upscale parties, but what interested me more was her client testimonial page. Several reviews mentioned how Ashley had helped couples plan dream weddings on short notice and had connections with premium vendors who could accommodate last-minute bookings. Short notice. That phrase kept appearing in Ashley's marketing materials, suggesting she specialized in expedited wedding planning. Which raised the question, why would Jake and Madison need to plan a wedding quickly? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi, Emma. This is Chloe Martinez from Lake Travis Resort. I understand you might be interested in our wedding packages. Would you be available for a brief call tomorrow to discuss your event needs? I stared at the message, confused about how someone from the resort had gotten my contact information. Then it occurred to me that Tyler might have reached out to wedding industry contacts on my behalf, though he hadn't mentioned approaching venues directly. I texted back, yes, I'd be interested in learning more. What time works best? The response came quickly, how about 2 p.m.? I'll call you then. The next morning brought another casual text from Jake about working late again, and I was beginning to recognize a pattern in his schedule. He worked late on the same days Madison taught yoga classes at Elite Fitness. The correlation was too consistent to be coincidental. I called Tyler during my lunch break to ask about the Lake Travis Resort contact. I didn't reach out to them, he said. But I did talk to a photographer friend who works a lot of weddings around Austin. Maybe she mentioned your situation to someone. What exactly did you tell her? Just that you were looking into wedding vendors for research purposes. I didn't give any specifics about Jake or the situation, which meant someone else had provided my contact information to Chloe Martinez. The most likely explanation was that my name had appeared in connection with the Thompson Blake wedding somehow, possibly as a secondary contact or emergency number. At exactly 2 p.m., my phone rang with a call from Lake Travis Resort. Hi, Emma, this is Chloe. Thanks for agreeing to talk. I understand you're interested in our wedding packages? Chloe's voice was young and friendly, with a slight nervousness that suggested she was relatively new to her position. Yes, I'm exploring options for a spring wedding, I replied, staying vague about the timeline. Wonderful. We have some beautiful packages available. Can I ask how you heard about us? I decided to take a calculated risk. Actually, a friend mentioned that you're handling the Thompson Blake wedding in May. She said it was going to be absolutely gorgeous. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh, you know Jake and Madison? They seem like such a sweet couple. My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. Yes, they're lovely together. I believe they're having the ceremony on the 18th? That's right, Saturday the 18th. It's going to be intimate, but elegant, exactly what they wanted. Chloe's casual confirmation of details hit me like a physical blow, but it also provided crucial verification. Madison mentioned something about the planning being a bit rushed. Has that been challenging? Well, yes, 6 weeks is definitely shorter than our usual timeline, but Ashley Blake has been incredible to work with. She's so organized and has great vendor relationships. When they decided to move forward quickly, she made everything possible. 6 weeks. They had booked their wedding around the same time I'd been addressing save-the-date cards for what I thought was my own wedding. Ashley's Madison's sister, right? I prompted. Yes, and she's just wonderful. This is actually one of the first weddings I've coordinated since starting here, so working with such a professional planner has been really helpful. Chloe's inexperience might be exactly what I needed. Someone more seasoned would be less likely to share details about other clients. I'm sure you're doing great, I said encouragingly. What's the guest count looking like for their event? About 75 people. Much more intimate than some of our larger weddings. But that's what makes it special. Madison wanted something that would photograph beautifully for her social media, but still feel personal and meaningful. Of course she did. Madison was planning to monetize her wedding through her influencer platform. That sounds perfect. And Jake seems so happy. Has he been very involved in the planning? Oh yes, he's been great. Very decisive about what he wants, very clear about the budget. Some grooms are hands-off, but Jake has opinions about everything from flowers to photography. He clearly wants this to be perfect for Madison. Each detail Chloe shared felt like a small knife wound. Jake, who had claimed to be overwhelmed by wedding planning when we discussed our own ceremony, was apparently quite capable of making decisive choices when he cared about the outcome. Well, I'd love to schedule a time to tour the facilities, I said. Would this weekend work? Absolutely. How about Saturday afternoon? I could show you around and we could discuss package options. Saturday afternoon was when Madison taught yoga at Elite Fitness, which meant Jake would likely be occupied elsewhere. Perfect timing for a reconnaissance mission. After ending the call with Chloe, I sat in my car outside my office building, processing everything I'd learned. Jake and Madison were planning an intimate but expensive wedding with professional photography specifically designed for social media content. They'd moved quickly to book the venue and vendors, suggesting either impulsive decision-making or some external pressure to marry soon. Most importantly, Jake was actively engaged in every aspect of the planning, which meant this wasn't a casual affair or a backup plan. This was his primary focus. My phone rang again, this time with Rachel's number. I have news, she said, without preamble. Jake Thompson and Madison Blake applied for a marriage license 3 days ago. The official confirmation hit harder than all the circumstantial evidence combined. They're really doing it. It gets worse. I also found 2 other interesting pieces of information. First, Madison Blake has a significant amount of credit card debt, mostly from her attempt to build her influencer business. Second, Jake took out a substantial loan against his real estate commissions last month. What does that mean? It suggests they might be financially motivated to move quickly. Madison needs money, Jake has access to money, and marriage would legally combine their financial situations. The implications were staggering. Not only was Jake betraying me emotionally, but he was potentially using our shared resources to fund his relationship with another woman. The loan against his commissions would affect our household finances, money I'd assumed we were saving for our future together. There's something else, Rachel continued. I ran a background check on Jake, just to be thorough. He has a pattern of overlapping relationships. 2 previous girlfriends filed complaints about financial irregularities after their breakups, though neither pursued formal charges. What kind of financial irregularities? Credit cards opened in their names without permission, shared expenses that were never reimbursed, that kind of thing. Nothing criminal enough to prosecute, but enough to suggest a pattern of using relationships for financial benefit. I felt nauseated. So this isn't about love. This is about money. Possibly both, but there are definitely financial motivations involved. Emma, I think you need to check your own financial accounts. Credit cards, bank statements, anything Jake would have access to. I drove home immediately and spent the next 2 hours reviewing every financial account I owned. What I found made my hands shake with rage. Jake had been systematically accessing my accounts for months, making small transfers that I'd missed in my regular statement reviews. Never enough to trigger alerts, but collectively adding up to several $1,000s. Money that had probably helped fund his relationship with Madison Blake. When Jake returned home that evening, I was waiting with a bottle of wine and a forced smile. "How was your day, honey?" "Good, just the usual client meetings and paperwork," he replied, accepting a glass of wine. "How about you?" "Actually, I had an interesting conversation today with someone from Lake Travis Resort." I watched Jake's face carefully for any reaction. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of something, panic, maybe, or calculation, before his expression returned to casual interest. "Lake Travis Resort? That's the wedding venue we looked at months ago, right? Too expensive for our budget?" "Right. But they called me about wedding packages. Apparently someone gave them my contact information." Jake shrugged. "Probably just a sales call. You know how wedding vendors are? They'll get your information anywhere they can." His explanation was reasonable, but I'd seen that momentary flash of concern. Jake knew exactly why Lake Travis Resort had my contact information, and he was calculating how to manage the situation. "You're probably right," I agreed. "Though I might take a tour this weekend, just to see what we'd be missing." "This weekend?" Jake's voice was carefully neutral. "I thought we were going to work on addressing wedding invitations." "We can do that Sunday. I just thought it would be fun to see the venue, even if we can't afford it." "I've got client showings most of Saturday," Jake said. "But go ahead, have fun dreaming about fancy venues." Client showings. Another lie to add to the growing collection. That night, I lay awake planning my next moves. I had evidence of Jake's deception, confirmation of his alternate wedding plans, and proof that he'd been stealing from me to fund his other relationship. But Rachel was right that I needed more concrete evidence before making any public accusations. I also needed to understand the full scope of his deception. How many people knew about Madison? What was his plan for ending our relationship? And most importantly, how could I ensure that he faced real consequences for his actions? The answer came to me as I watched Jake sleep peacefully beside me, completely unaware that his carefully constructed lies were unraveling. I wouldn't just expose his deception. I would give him exactly what he wanted: a public wedding with all the attention and social media coverage Madison could desire. I would make sure their wedding day was absolutely unforgettable. The plan forming in my mind was ambitious and would require careful coordination, but I had advantages Jake didn't know about. I understood social media dynamics. I had connections throughout Austin's professional community, through my marketing work. And I had allies who were ready to help. Most importantly, I had the element of surprise. Jake and Madison thought they were operating in secret, but they were actually performing for an audience of one who was documenting their every move. By the time I finished planning their wedding surprise, Jake Thompson would understand that some lies have consequences he never imagined. Saturday morning arrived with Jake kissing my forehead and whispering that he'd be showing houses all day to demanding clients from Dallas. I watched him dress carefully in his most expensive suit, the one he usually reserved for closing major deals or impressing particularly wealthy buyers. For someone supposedly showing property to out-of-town clients, he was putting considerable effort into his appearance. "You look handsome," I said, meaning it despite everything. Jake had always been attractive, and his deception hadn't changed the basic facts of his appearance. "These Dallas clients must be important. Potentially huge commission," he replied, adjusting his tie in our bedroom mirror. "They're looking at properties in the 3 to 5 million range." I made appropriate impressed noises, while mentally noting that Jake had never mentioned specific client details before. His sudden chattiness about work felt like overcompensation, the kind of excessive detail people provided when they were lying. After Jake left, I dressed for my own deception. My visit to Lake Travis Resort required walking a delicate line between appearing genuinely interested in wedding services while gathering intelligence about Jake and Madison's plans. I chose an outfit that suggested affluent but not ostentatious taste, the kind of understated elegance that wedding venue coordinators would recognize as serious money. The drive to Lake Travis took me through some of Austin's most scenic areas, winding roads that curved around the lake with glimpses of expensive homes nestled among the trees. Lake Travis Resort sat on a prime piece of waterfront property, its main building designed in the kind of rustic luxury aesthetic that appeared in destination wedding magazines. Chloe Martinez met me in the lobby with obvious excitement. She was younger than I'd expected, probably mid-20s. with the eager enthusiasm of someone still new enough to her job to find every client interaction genuinely exciting. "Emma, it's so wonderful to meet you in person," she said, extending her hand with a warm smile. "I'm so excited to show you our facilities. I think you're going to love what we have to offer." As Chloe led me through the resort's main areas, she chattered enthusiastically about the venue's history, amenities, and wedding packages. The space was undeniably beautiful, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, elegant stone fireplaces, and the kind of carefully curated rustic details that suggested considerable expense. "This is our main ceremony space," Chloe announced, opening French doors to reveal a landscaped terrace that sloped down toward the water. "We can accommodate up to 200 guests for outdoor ceremonies, though many couples prefer smaller, more intimate gatherings." I could immediately see why Jake and Madison had chosen this location. The setting was Instagram perfect, with natural lighting that would make every photograph look professionally shot. For an influencer like Madison, the backdrop would provide endless content opportunities. "It's beautiful," I said honestly, "very romantic." "Yes, and the photography opportunities are incredible. Actually, the couple getting married here next weekend specifically chose us because of how well our space photographs. The bride is some kind of social media personality, so visual appeal was a major factor in their decision. Next weekend." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression casually interested. "That sounds lovely. Is this a busy season for you?" "We're definitely seeing more bookings lately, especially for spring and early summer weddings. The couple next week actually booked quite recently, but they had such a clear vision for what they wanted that planning came together quickly." Chloe led me through the resort's other spaces, while continuing to share details about the venue's capabilities. The bridal suite was elegantly appointed with vintage furniture and natural lighting perfect for getting ready photos. The groom's preparation room was smaller but equally well designed, with leather furniture and a masculine aesthetic. "Your catering options are quite extensive," I observed, reviewing the menus Chloe provided. "Our executive chef trained at several Michelin-starred restaurants before joining us. We can accommodate virtually any dietary restrictions or cultural preferences." The couple next weekend chose our farm-to-table package with locally sourced ingredients and wine pairings from Texas vineyards. Every detail Chloe shared painted a picture of Jake and Madison's wedding as carefully planned and expensive. This wasn't a casual elopement or budget-conscious celebration. They were investing serious money in creating an elaborate, photogenic event. "The planning process must be quite involved for events this sophisticated," I said. "It can be, but we work with some amazing wedding planners who make everything seamless. Ashley Blake, who's coordinating the wedding next weekend, is absolutely incredible. She has connections with the best vendors in Austin and can make almost anything happen on short notice." I seized the opening. "Ashley Blake. That name sounds familiar. Is she well known in the Austin wedding industry?" "She's building quite a reputation. She's actually the bride's sister, which makes the collaboration even smoother. Family weddings can be challenging because everyone has opinions, but Madison and Ashley work beautifully together." The casual confirmation that Madison and Ashley were sisters provided another piece of verification for my growing evidence file. That must make things easier when it's family. "Definitely. And Jake, the groom, has been so involved in every decision. You can tell he really wants everything to be perfect for Madison. Some grooms are completely hands-off, but Jake has strong opinions about flowers, music, photography, all of it." Each detail about Jake's involvement felt like a personal insult. The man who had claimed to be overwhelmed by our wedding planning was apparently quite capable of decisive choices when he cared about the outcome. "Well, he sounds like a dream groom," I managed to say. "He really is. Madison is so lucky." Chloe continued the tour, showing me additional event spaces and explaining various package options. As we walked, she mentioned other weddings they'd hosted, vendor relationships they maintained, and logistical details about coordinating large events. "I'd love to see some photos of recent weddings," I said. "Do you have portfolios of your work?" "Absolutely. Let me grab our recent events album." Chloe disappeared into an office, and returned with a leather-bound photo album showcasing weddings from the past year. As she flipped through the pages, pointing out different ceremony setups and decoration themes, I found myself genuinely impressed by the venue's capabilities. Then she turned to a page that made my breath catch. The photos showed a recent wedding reception, and in the background of one image, I could clearly see Jake talking with a woman who matched Madison Blake's appearance. They were standing close together, his hand resting on her lower back in an unmistakably intimate gesture. "This was such a beautiful event from last month," Chloe said, apparently not noticing my reaction. "The bride and groom were friends of one of our upcoming couples, actually." I stared at the photograph, processing the implications. Jake and Madison had attended a wedding together at Lake Travis Resort, probably as research for their own event. They'd been planning this for longer than I'd realized, and they'd been doing it openly enough to appear in other people's wedding photographs. "The guests all seemed to be having a wonderful time," I said carefully. "Yes, it was such a joyful celebration. The bride and groom were so happy, and you could tell their friends and family really supported their relationship." The irony was devastating. Jake and Madison had attended someone else's wedding celebration while secretly planning their own, probably using the opportunity to finalize details with venue staff and vendors. "I think I've seen enough for today," I said, suddenly needing to leave before my carefully maintained composure cracked. "This is definitely a beautiful venue, and I can see why couples choose it for their special day." "Wonderful. Should we schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss specific packages and availability?" "I'll need to talk with my fiancé first," I said, the word feeling like ash in my mouth. "Can I call you early next week?" "Of course. Here's my direct number, and please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions." The drive back to Austin passed in a blur of anger and determination. The photograph of Jake and Madison together had provided visual confirmation of their relationship, but it had also shown me something else. They were comfortable being seen together in public. Either they didn't care about maintaining their secret, or they felt confident that they wouldn't be discovered. That confidence was about to become their biggest mistake. I spent the afternoon researching Ashley Blake event planning more thoroughly. Her business website featured testimonials from satisfied clients, but what interested me more were the vendor relationships she advertised. Ashley claimed partnerships with Austin's most exclusive florists, photographers, caterers, and musicians. One name appeared frequently in her vendor listings: Marcus Photography, whose website showcased wedding albums that looked like magazine spreads. Marcus specialized in what he called lifestyle wedding photography, creating images that captured not just the ceremony, but the entire aesthetic of the couple's relationship, perfect for an influencer bride who wanted content for her social media platforms. I called Marcus Photography's studio and spoke with a receptionist who confirmed they were booked for a wedding at Lake Travis Resort the following Saturday. When I mentioned that I'd heard great things about their work from Ashley Blake, the receptionist became even more enthusiastic. "Oh, Ashley is wonderful to work with. She always has such clear visions for her events, and her clients are usually very photogenic. The wedding next weekend is going to be gorgeous. I'm actually friends with the bride," I lied smoothly. "Madison Blake. She's been so excited about the photography." "Yes, Madison seems lovely. She and Jake came in for their engagement session last month, and the photos turned out beautifully. They're such a photogenic couple." Engagement photos. They'd taken professional engagement photos while Jake was still engaged to me. "I'd love to see them," I said. "Are they featured on your website?" "Not yet, but I can ask Marcus if he'd be willing to share a few previews." Madison mentioned she's building her social media presence, so she might appreciate the additional exposure. After ending the call, I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, trembling with rage. Jake and Madison had taken engagement photos together. They'd attended weddings as a couple. They'd applied for a marriage license. They weren't just planning a secret wedding. They were building an entire public relationship while I remained completely oblivious. My phone rang with Tyler's number, and I answered gratefully. "How did the venue tour go?" he asked. "It went exactly as I expected and worse than I imagined," I replied. "Tyler, they've been together for months, not just secretly dating, but actually building a life together. Engagement photos, public appearances, the works." "Emma, I'm so sorry. That's incredibly cruel. I need your help with something. Can you meet me tonight? I want to show you what I've discovered, and I need advice about next steps." "Of course. My place or yours?" Your place. I don't want to risk Jake overhearing anything. Tyler's apartment was in an converted warehouse in East Austin, the kind of space that attracted creative professionals who valued character over luxury. His living room doubled as his design studio, with computers, drawing tablets, and samples from various projects scattered across multiple workstations. I spread my evidence across his dining table, screenshots from social media, photographs from the venue tour, notes from phone conversations, financial records showing Jake's unauthorized access to my accounts. Tyler reviewed everything methodically, occasionally asking questions or requesting clarification about specific details. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair with an expression of disgust. "Emma, this is systematic fraud, not just emotional betrayal, but actual financial crimes." "I know. The question is what to do about it. Have you considered simply calling him out publicly? Social media post with all this evidence?" I'd thought about it. But Rachel's warnings about needing concrete proof had made me cautious. Jake is skilled at manipulation. If I just dump evidence online, he'll find ways to discredit it or make me look unstable. So what's your alternative? I pulled out my laptop and opened a document I'd been working on since leaving Lake Travis Resort. "I'm going to their wedding." Tyler stared at me. "You're going to what?" Think about it logically. They're planning a public wedding with professional photography, social media coverage, and 75 guests. Madison wants this event to enhance her influencer brand. They're creating a public spectacle, which means they're vulnerable to public exposure. Emma, that sounds incredibly dangerous. What if Jake becomes violent? What if they call security? That's where you come in. I need backup documentation and witnesses. This can't be an emotional confrontation where I look like the crazy ex-girlfriend. This needs to be strategic, planned, and recorded. Tyler was quiet for several minutes, considering the implications. Finally, he spoke. "What exactly are you proposing?" I opened my laptop to a detailed plan I'd been developing. Next Saturday, Madison Blake and Jake Thompson are having their dream wedding at Lake Travis Resort. Professional photography, curated guest list, social media coverage. They want a perfect event that launches Madison's brand as a married influencer. And you want to crash it. I want to give them exactly what they're asking for. A memorable wedding that everyone will be talking about. But instead of celebrating their love, we'll be exposing their deception. Tyler studied my notes. This is elaborate. It has to be. Jake has been planning this deception for months. He deserves consequences that match the scope of his lies. What kind of consequences? I showed Tyler research I'd done into Texas marriage laws, social media policies, and potential legal ramifications for fraud, public humiliation, legal liability for the financial crimes, destruction of his professional reputation, and complete exposure of the elaborate lies he's constructed. And Madison? Madison gets to learn that her dream husband is the kind of man who steals money from his previous fiancé to fund their relationship. She gets to discover that her perfect love story is built on criminal deception. Tyler was quiet again, processing the plan's implications. "Emma, are you sure you want to do this? Once you cross this line, there's no going back." There's already no going back. Jake made that choice when he decided to steal my money to fund his other relationship. I'm just ensuring that his choices have appropriate consequences. "Okay," Tyler said finally. "If you're determined to do this, then we're going to do it right. No half measures, no emotional reactions, professional, documented, and devastating." We spent the next 3 hours refining the plan. Tyler would handle the technical aspects: recording equipment, social media strategy, legal documentation. I would manage the timing, coordination, and confrontation itself. "We'll need someone else," Tyler said as we finished our planning. "Someone who can provide official witness testimony if this goes to court." "Rachel?" I said immediately. "She can't participate officially because she's law enforcement, but she can be present as my friend and provide professional perspective if needed. And backup security in case things get ugly." By the time I left Tyler's apartment, We had developed a comprehensive strategy for exposing Jake and Madison's deception in the most public, documented, and legally sound way possible. The plan was ambitious, risky, and would require precise timing, but it would give them exactly the kind of memorable wedding they deserved. Sunday morning brought Jake home with coffee and pastries from our favorite bakery, acting like the devoted fiancé he'd never actually been. He seemed relaxed and happy, probably because he'd spent Saturday with Madison, instead of showing houses to non-existent clients. "How was the venue tour yesterday?" he asked, settling beside me on the couch with his coffee. "Beautiful, but you were right about the expense. Way outside our budget." Jake nodded sympathetically. "I know you had your heart set on something elegant, but we'll find something perfect within our price range." The casual lies rolled off his tongue so easily that I wondered how many other deceptions I'd accepted without question over the past 3 years. "Actually, I've been thinking about our budget," I said carefully. "Have you noticed our savings account balance lately?" For just a moment, Jake's expression flickered with something that might have been concern. "Not specifically. Why?" "It seems lower than I expected. I was wondering if there were expenses I'd forgotten about." "Wedding planning is expensive," Jake said smoothly. "Deposits, vendor payments, all those little costs add up quickly." Another lie. Jake knew exactly why our accounts were lower, because he'd been systematically draining them to fund his relationship with Madison. "You're probably right," I agreed. "I should be more careful about tracking our expenses." That afternoon, Rachel called with additional information she'd gathered about Jake's background. "Emma, I found something disturbing. Jake has been married before." My heart stopped. "What do you mean married before?" 7 years ago in Dallas. Marriage lasted 18 months before ending in divorce. The divorce records mention financial irregularities and allegations of emotional manipulation, though nothing was formally pursued. Why didn't I know about this? Because he deliberately concealed it. The marriage happened under his full legal name, Jacob Michael Thompson, but he's been using Jake Thompson professionally for years. Unless you specifically searched for Jacob Michael Thompson, you'd never find the records. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Jake had not only been lying about Madison, but had been lying about his entire romantic history. I was engaged to someone whose past I didn't actually know. "There's more," Rachel continued. "His ex-wife lives in Dallas. Her name is Jennifer Thompson, maiden name Rodriguez, and here's the interesting part. She works in social media marketing, just like you. He has a type. It appears so. Emma, I think you should consider the possibility that Jake specifically targets women with certain professional skills. Marketing professionals, social media experts, people who can enhance his business reputation and provide financial stability." The pattern was becoming clear. Jake didn't just fall in love and then happen to benefit from his relationships. He actively sought out women who could advance his goals, used their resources and expertise, then moved on when he found better opportunities. Madison Blake wasn't just his new girlfriend. She was his upgrade path to a different level of social and professional status. What happened to Jennifer Thompson after the divorce? She rebuilt her career and moved on, but it took years to recover financially. Jake left her with significant debt that she had to manage alone. And now he's doing the same thing to me. It appears so. But Emma, you have advantages Jennifer didn't have. You discovered his deception before the relationship ended. You have evidence of his financial crimes. And you have people supporting you. That evening I sat across from Jake at dinner, watching him tell elaborate stories about his day while knowing that everything he said was probably fabricated. He was charming, attentive, and completely convincing in his performance of devoted fiancé. But now I understood that it was exactly that, a performance. Jake Thompson was skilled at becoming whatever his current target needed him to be. With me, he'd been the ambitious real estate professional who wanted a stable, successful partner. With Madison, he was apparently the romantic lead for her influencer lifestyle brand. "You're quiet tonight," Jake observed. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I replied. "Work has been stressful lately." Well, in a few weeks we'll be married and can start thinking about our future together. Maybe a nice honeymoon in Europe, like we talked about. I wondered if Jake was planning a European honeymoon with me or with Madison. Probably neither, since by that point he'd likely have moved on to his next target. That sounds wonderful, I said, meaning none of it. Later that night, while Jake slept peacefully beside me, I finalized the details of my plan for the following Saturday. Tyler and Rachel were coordinated. Equipment was arranged. Documentation was prepared. Jake Thompson had spent months planning the perfect wedding to launch his new life with Madison Blake. In 5 days, he would get exactly the memorable ceremony he deserved. The only surprise would be discovering that some secrets can't stay hidden forever, and some deceptions carry consequences he'd never imagined. Monday morning brought an unexpected development that almost derailed everything. Jake announced over coffee that he'd planned a surprise for me. "I've been thinking about how stressed you've been lately," he said, sitting across from me at our kitchen table with that smile that used to make me feel loved and now just made me feel manipulated. "So I booked us a long weekend in San Antonio. We leave Friday afternoon and come back Sunday evening." My heart hammered as I processed the implications. Friday to Sunday would encompass their wedding day. Jake was trying to remove me from Austin entirely during his ceremony with Madison. "That's so thoughtful," I managed to say, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. "But this Friday? I have that big presentation for the Morrison account. Can't you reschedule? We've both been working so hard, and I thought we deserved some time away together before the final wedding preparations get crazy." Jake's concern seemed genuine, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes. This wasn't a romantic gesture. This was damage control. Something had made him nervous about having me in Austin this weekend. "Let me check with my team," I said. "The Morrison presentation is important, but maybe we can move it to the following week." "Great. I already made reservations at that historic hotel you mentioned wanting to visit." After Jake left for work, I immediately called Tyler. "He's trying to get me out of town," I said without preamble. "For the wedding weekend? That's not coincidence." "Definitely not. Something spooked him. Maybe Chloe mentioned my visit to Lake Travis Resort, or maybe he's just being extra cautious." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to San Antonio like the devoted fiancé I'm supposed to be, but I'll be coming back Saturday morning with a convenient emergency that requires my immediate return to Austin." "What kind of emergency?" "Leave that to me. Can you handle coordinating with Rachel and setting up the equipment without me being here to oversee it?" "Absolutely. But Emma, this complicates things. If Jake becomes suspicious about why you returned early, it could ruin the entire plan." "It won't ruin anything. By the time Jake realizes I'm back in Austin, it'll be too late for him to do anything about it." That afternoon, I called Chloe Martinez at Lake Travis Resort, ostensibly to follow up on our venue tour. "Hi, Chloe. This is Emma Rodriguez. I toured your facility last Saturday." "Of course, Emma. Have you had a chance to discuss our packages with your fiancé?" "We're still talking through options, but I wanted to ask about this weekend. I know you mentioned having a wedding Saturday, and I was wondering about noise levels. We were thinking of bringing my parents for a tour, but I don't want to disturb another couple's special day." "Oh, that's so considerate of you." "The ceremony is scheduled for 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon, so mornings should be perfectly quiet for tours. Though honestly, it's going to be such a beautiful event that your parents might enjoy seeing the setup if they're interested in wedding planning." "What time do vendors usually start arriving for setup?" "For an afternoon ceremony, most vendors are here by 10 a.m. Florists come early, then catering, photography, music. By noon, everything is usually in place for final touches." "Perfect. I'd need to arrive after the setup was complete but before the ceremony began." "And the guest count for Saturday's event?" 75 people, so not huge but definitely a substantial celebration. The bride has quite a social media following, so there will probably be professional photography and videography beyond our usual package." "Sounds lovely. I'll definitely try to schedule our tour for earlier in the day to avoid any conflicts." Tuesday brought another piece of the puzzle when I discovered Jake researching apartment rentals online. He'd left his laptop open to a real estate website showing luxury apartments in Austin's trendiest neighborhoods, all significantly more expensive than our current place. The search history revealed he'd been looking at properties for weeks, focusing on places that would accommodate 2 people, with what appeared to be a substantial combined income. These weren't apartments for a single man. They were apartments for a couple with influencer-level lifestyle expectations. I photographed the computer screen, adding the evidence to my growing file. Jake wasn't just planning to marry Madison. He was planning their entire life together, complete with an upgraded living situation that would provide the kind of photogenic backdrop Madison's social media brand required. When Jake returned from work that evening, I was ready with casual conversation about our weekend plans. I managed to move the Morrison presentation to next Wednesday, I announced. So San Antonio, here we come. Fantastic. I think this is exactly what we need. Some time to reconnect away from all the wedding stress. Where did you book us? You were mysterious about the details. The historic Emily Morgan Hotel. It's supposed to be romantic and elegant, perfect for a pre-wedding getaway. I looked up the hotel while Jake showered, noting that it was indeed romantic and elegant, and also perfectly positioned to keep me occupied while Jake married another woman 2 hours away. Wednesday evening brought a development that made my blood boil. Jake received a phone call that he claimed was work-related, but his side of the conversation suggested something entirely different. No, Friday works perfectly, he said, pacing in our living room while I pretended to work on my laptop. We'll be out of town, so timing isn't an issue. Yes, she's completely unaware. No, I don't think there will be any complications. He stepped onto our balcony to continue the conversation privately, but I could see him through the glass doors, gesturing animatedly as he spoke. When he returned, his expression was satisfied in a way that made my skin crawl. Important client call? I asked. Just coordinating some weekend showings. You know how it is with high-end properties. Clients want access when it's convenient for them, not necessarily when it's convenient for us. Another lie, delivered with the same casual confidence as all the others. Thursday morning, I met with Tyler and Rachel at a coffee shop downtown to finalize our plans for Saturday. We'd chosen a location far from Jake's usual haunts, and I told him I was meeting college friends for a girls' lunch. Everything is in place, Tyler reported, spreading photos across our table. I scouted Lake Travis Resort yesterday afternoon. Security is minimal, parking is public access, and there are multiple vantage points for documentation. Rachel pulled out a folder of papers. I've coordinated with a contact in the sheriff's department who covers that area. If things get out of hand, we'll have immediate backup available. What about recording equipment? Professional grade, multiple cameras, backup audio recording, Tyler said. We'll have everything documented from multiple angles with redundant systems in case anything fails. Rachel leaned forward, her expression serious. Emma, I need you to understand something. Once we execute this plan, there's no controlling what happens next. Jake's reaction could be unpredictable, and Madison's response might be more dramatic than you expect. I've thought about that. But Rachel, they've been systematically deceiving everyone in their lives for months. Their families, their friends, their professional contacts, everyone who cares about them has been lied to. Don't they deserve to know the truth? Yes, but there are safer ways to reveal the truth than confronting them publicly at their wedding ceremony. Tyler intervened. We've planned this carefully. Multiple witnesses, professional documentation, legal backup. If anything goes wrong, we're prepared. And if everything goes right? If everything goes right, Jake and Madison get exactly the memorable wedding they deserve, and everyone who's been deceived by their lies finally learns the truth. Rachel studied my face. You're absolutely certain about this? Jake has been stealing money from me to fund his relationship with another woman, while planning to marry her on what was supposed to be my wedding date. He's systematically destroyed my financial security and emotional well-being while pretending to love me. Yes, I'm absolutely certain. Thursday evening, Jake was unusually attentive, bringing me flowers and suggesting we cook dinner together. His behavior felt like performance art. The devoted fiancé role played with theatrical precision. I'm really looking forward to our weekend away, he said as we prepared pasta together in our kitchen. It feels like we haven't had quality time together in weeks. You've been working so much lately, I agreed. It'll be nice to focus on just us for a few days. Exactly. No work stress. No wedding planning pressure, just time to remember why we fell in love. The casual manipulation in his words was breathtaking. Jake was using our romantic history as a tool to ensure my compliance with his plan to remove me from Austin during his wedding to another woman. Jake, can I ask you something? Of course, anything. Do you ever think about the future? Really think about what our life will look like in 5 or 10 years? Jake paused in his pasta stirring, and I saw him calculating his response. All the time. I see us building something beautiful together. Successful careers, maybe a family eventually, definitely travel and adventures. And you're happy with me? With us? Emma, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. I can't imagine my life without you. The lies came so easily that I wondered if Jake even remembered what the truth felt like anymore. Friday morning arrived with Jake in an excellent mood, whistling as he packed for our San Antonio trip. He'd clearly spent considerable time planning our weekend, with restaurant reservations, activity schedules, and a detailed itinerary designed to keep me occupied and entertained. You've really thought of everything, I said, reviewing his planning notes. I wanted this to be special. We both deserve a break from reality. A break from reality. If only Jake knew how prophetic those words were. The drive to San Antonio took us through beautiful hill country scenery, and under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed the romantic getaway Jake had planned. The historic Emily Morgan Hotel was elegant and luxurious. Our room had a stunning view of the Riverwalk, and Jake had made reservations at some of the city's most acclaimed restaurants. This is perfect, I said as we settled into our room, meaning it genuinely despite everything else. I'm glad you like it. I thought we could explore the Riverwalk this afternoon, have dinner at Bohannon's tonight, maybe visit the Pearl Farmers Market tomorrow morning. Jake's planning was meticulous, designed to keep us busy and engaged throughout the weekend. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a wonderfully romantic getaway. What time is our dinner reservation? 7:30, which gives us plenty of time to explore and relax before we need to get ready. That evening at Bohannon's, Jake was charming, attentive, and everything I'd fallen in love with 3 years earlier. He told stories about his work, asked about my latest marketing campaigns, and spoke enthusiastically about our upcoming wedding as if it were the most important thing in his life. I know wedding planning has been stressful, he said over dessert, but I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done to make our day special. Our day, I repeated, wondering if he'd used the same phrase with Madison when discussing their ceremony. Our day, he confirmed, reaching across the table to take my hand. The day I get to marry the woman I love. Saturday morning, Jake suggested we sleep in and have a leisurely breakfast before exploring the Pearl Farmers Market. His relaxed attitude confirmed that he felt confident about his deception. In his mind, I was safely 2 hours away from Austin, with no idea about his wedding to Madison. Actually, I was thinking we could get an early start, I said. Maybe drive back to Austin this afternoon instead of tomorrow? I just remembered I have some work things I need to handle. For the first time all weekend, I saw anxiety flash across Jake's face. Work things? On the weekend? The Morrison account has been demanding, and I realized there are some details I need to review before the presentation next week. Can't it wait until Sunday evening? We have such a nice schedule planned for today. I hate to cut our weekend short, but you know how important this account is. Jake was quiet for several minutes, clearly calculating whether he could dissuade me without appearing suspicious. Okay, if you really need to handle work stuff, we can drive back this afternoon. Thank you for understanding. Maybe we can do the farmer's market quickly this morning and then head home around noon? Sure, whatever you need. But I could see the wheels turning in Jake's mind. He'd planned this weekend specifically to keep me away from Austin during his wedding, and now his careful orchestration was falling apart. At the Pearl Farmers Market, Jake seemed distracted and kept checking his phone. I pretended not to notice while browsing vendor stalls and sampling local products. His anxiety was growing with each passing hour, and I suspected he was communicating with Madison or Ashley about contingency plans. Ready to head back? I asked around 11:30. Actually, maybe we should have lunch here first. There's this great restaurant I wanted to try. I'm really anxious to get back and handle those work issues. Jake's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Emma, it's Saturday morning. Whatever work crisis you're worried about can wait a few more hours. I'd just feel better if we headed back soon. Fine, he said with the first hint of irritation he'd shown all weekend. Let's go. The drive back to Austin was tense in a way our trip down had not been. Jake kept checking his phone at red lights, and I could see him struggling with whether to find another excuse to delay our return. His carefully planned weekend was unraveling, and he didn't know how to manage the situation without revealing why he needed me to stay away from Austin. "Everything okay?" I asked as we reached the Austin city limits. "You seem stressed." "Just thinking about everything I need to handle next week." "Anything I can help with?" "No, just work stuff. Client management, you know how it is." We reached our apartment complex at 2:15. Jake's wedding was scheduled to begin at 4 o'clock, which meant vendors and guests would already be arriving at Lake Travis Resort. As we climbed the stairs to our unit, I could see Jake calculating whether he had time to salvage his situation. "I actually need to run some errands," he announced as we entered our apartment. "Grocery store. Maybe stop by the office to handle a few things." "On Saturday afternoon?" "You know how real estate is. Clients don't respect boundaries." Jake was clearly planning to drive to Lake Travis Resort to warn Madison about my unexpected return to Austin. But he was too late, and he didn't know it yet. "Go ahead," I said. "I'll be here handling my work stuff." Jake kissed my forehead with what felt like desperation. "I love you, Emma. I love you too." As soon as Jake left, I changed clothes and drove toward Lake Travis Resort. Tyler and Rachel would already be in position, and by now, Jake's wedding preparations would be in full swing. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Everything ready. Security minimal. Perfect positioning achieved. Are you sure about this?" I typed back. "Never been more sure of anything. See you in 20 minutes. The drive to Lake Travis Resort felt both eternal and instantaneous. 3 years of my life were about to end, but they were ending on my terms, with the truth finally exposed and consequences finally delivered. Jake Thompson had spent months planning the perfect wedding to launch his new life. He was about to discover that some perfection comes with a price he'd never imagined paying. As I pulled into the resort parking lot and saw the elegant setup visible through the windows, the professional photography equipment, and the guests beginning to arrive in their formal attire, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. Madison Blake was about to learn what kind of man she was marrying. Jake Thompson was about to discover that some lies can't be hidden forever. And I was about to make sure their special day was exactly as memorable as they'd always dreamed. The only surprise would be learning that some fairy tales end with consequences instead of happily ever after. Lake Travis Resort buzzed with wedding day energy as I walked through the main entrance at 3:30. The afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden highlights across elegant floral arrangements that adorned every available surface. White roses intertwined with eucalyptus created sophisticated centerpieces, while string quartet musicians positioned themselves on the lakefront terrace, tuning their instruments with the precision of seasoned professionals. Guests in formal attire mingled throughout the main reception area, champagne glasses catching the light as they moved in small groups, their conversations a pleasant murmur of excitement and anticipation. Professional photographers moved discreetly through the crowd, capturing candid moments of pre-ceremony joy, while a videographer tested angles and lighting for what was clearly intended to be a premium wedding documentation package. It was exactly the kind of picture-perfect wedding Madison Blake had been curating for her social media brand for months. Every detail had been carefully selected not just for beauty, but for photogenic appeal. The color palette of whites, greens, and gold would translate beautifully to Instagram. The lakefront setting provided natural lighting that would make every photograph look professionally shot. The guest list included enough attractive, well-dressed people to create the kind of aspirational content that drove engagement and follower growth. What Madison didn't know was that her perfect day was about to become unforgettable for entirely different reasons than she'd planned. Tyler appeared at my elbow, looking remarkably sharp in a borrowed charcoal suit that helped him blend seamlessly with the other wedding guests. His usual creative professional aesthetic had been replaced with country club respectability, complete with a silk tie and pocket square that suggested old money rather than artistic entrepreneurship. "Everyone's in position. he murmured, his voice barely audible above the ambient conversation. Rachel is stationed near the ceremony space, with clear sightlines to both the altar and the guest seating. All recording equipment is active and functioning perfectly. Audio quality is crystal clear, and we have multiple camera angles covered. I adjusted the small silver earpiece hidden beneath my carefully styled hair, hearing the faint crackle that confirmed our communication system was operational. "How do I look?" I asked, smoothing the elegant navy dress I'd chosen for this moment. The dress had been selected with the same strategic thinking I'd applied to marketing campaigns over the years. Sophisticated enough to belong at an upscale wedding, but not so attention-grabbing that I'd stand out prematurely. The color was flattering but understated. The style was timeless rather than trendy, and the overall effect suggested someone who belonged in this social circle without competing with the bride for visual attention. "Like someone who absolutely belongs here," Tyler confirmed, his eyes scanning the room to assess our positioning. "Are you ready for this? Because once we start, there's no going back." I surveyed the scene one more time, taking in details that would be burned into my memory forever. The professional photographer was adjusting his lens settings while discussing shot lists with what appeared to be a photography assistant. The videographer was testing equipment that looked expensive enough to produce content worthy of Madison's influencer aspirations. Ashley Blake moved through the space with the confident efficiency of an experienced event planner, directing vendors and coordinating final details with military precision. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned for what was supposed to be Madison and Jake's perfect day. The weather was ideal, the setting was spectacular, the vendors were performing flawlessly, and the guests were appropriately dressed and enthusiastic. From any objective standpoint, this was shaping up to be exactly the kind of wedding that would enhance Madison's personal brand and launch Jake's entry into a higher level of Austin society. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I said, meaning every word. The ceremony space had been transformed into what could only be described as an Instagram paradise. White roses and lush greenery created elegant archways that framed the lakefront view, while gauzy white fabric draped artistically between wooden posts, moving gently in the afternoon breeze. The natural amphitheater created by the sloping lawn meant that every seat offered an excellent view of both the ceremony and the water beyond. Chiavari chairs in natural wood were arranged in perfect rows, each adorned with simple white ribbon and a single rose. The aisle runner was pure white linen that seemed to glow in the golden afternoon light. At the altar, an arch of white flowers and greenery provided the perfect backdrop for what Madison had clearly envisioned as the most important photographs of her life. The attention to detail was remarkable. Every element had been chosen not just for beauty, but for its photogenic qualities. The color palette would translate perfectly to social media. The natural lighting would eliminate the need for extensive photo editing. The backdrop would provide the kind of aspirational content that drove engagement and established social status. Madison had clearly spared no expense in creating her dream wedding aesthetic, and given what I'd discovered about Jake's unauthorized access to my financial accounts, she'd literally spared no expense that wasn't mine. Guests began taking their seats as the string quartet transitioned from background music to more formal pre-ceremony selections. I positioned myself strategically in the back row where I could observe everything while remaining inconspicuous until the crucial moment. The location gave me clear sightlines to the altar, the photographer's positions, and most importantly, the sound system that Ashley had thoughtfully provided for music and announcements. Through my earpiece, I could hear Tyler coordinating with Rachel to ensure all angles were covered and all recording equipment was functioning properly. We'd planned this operation with the same attention to detail that I'd applied to successful marketing campaigns, understanding that execution would be everything. The guests represented an interesting cross-section of Austin's young professional community. I recognized several faces from social media, local business events, and the kind of networking functions that Jake attended for his real estate career. These were people who valued image, success, and the kind of lifestyle that Madison's influencer brand represented. They were also people who would ensure that whatever happened today would be documented, shared, and discussed throughout Austin's social circles for months to come. At 3:50, the wedding party began their processional. The music shifted to a more formal piece that I recognized from countless other weddings, and the photographer positioned himself for optimal shots of the bridal party's entrance. Ashley Blake walked down the aisle first, elegant in an emerald green silk dress that complemented her role as both sister of the bride and professional event coordinator. Her expression was composed and confident, clearly pleased with how everything was proceeding according to her careful planning. She took her position at the altar with the grace of someone accustomed to being photographed and evaluated. 2 other bridesmaids followed, women I didn't recognize but who fit perfectly with Madison's aesthetic preferences. They were young, attractive, and dressed in coordinating shades that would photograph beautifully against the natural backdrop. Their smiles seemed genuine, suggesting they were close friends who genuinely believed they were witnessing Madison's happy ending. Brad Wilson appeared next as Jake's best man, looking uncomfortable in formal wear but playing his role dutifully. Brad had always struck me as someone more at home in athletic gear than formal attire, but he'd clearly made an effort for Jake's special day. His presence reminded me of how Jake had cultivated friendships that served his purposes, surrounding himself with people who would support his narrative without asking too many questions. Then Jake appeared, and despite everything I knew about his deception, my breath caught. He looked handsome and confident, in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, every inch the successful groom living his best life. His smile seemed genuine as he moved down the aisle, apparently without a care in the world. His posture was relaxed, his expression was joyful, and his overall demeanor suggested a man completely comfortable with his choices. This was the Jake who had charmed me 3 years earlier, the successful professional who seemed to have his life together and wanted to share it with someone special. Looking at him now, I could understand how I'd been deceived, how Madison had been deceived, and how he'd probably deceive his next victim. He was genuinely skilled at projecting exactly the image people wanted to see. As Jake took his position at the altar, he glanced over the assembled guests with obvious satisfaction. This was his moment of triumph, the culmination of months of careful planning and deception. He had successfully arranged to marry his upgrade while maintaining his existing relationship until the last possible moment. In his mind, he'd executed a perfect strategy that would give him everything he wanted without consequences for his lies. The music shifted again to the traditional wedding march, and Madison Blake made her entrance. She was, objectively speaking, absolutely stunning. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of modern bridal fashion, form-fitting lace that hugged her influencer-perfect figure before flowing into a dramatic train that seemed to float behind her as she moved. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves that caught the golden afternoon light perfectly, and her makeup was flawless in the way that only professional application could achieve. Every step down the aisle was calculated for maximum photographic impact. Madison understood angles, lighting, and the importance of creating memorable visual content. This wasn't just a bride walking to her groom. This was a content creator producing the most important material of her career. The photographer was capturing every moment with obvious enthusiasm, while guests held up phones to record what they clearly believed was a fairy tale wedding. Madison's smile was radiant as she approached Jake, her eyes locked on his with what appeared to be genuine love and excitement. This was the moment Madison had been building toward for months. Her transformation from Dallas fitness instructor to Austin society bride was complete. Her social media presence would be elevated by marriage to a successful real estate professional. Her lifestyle brand would benefit from association with Jake's business connections and financial resources. Everything she'd worked for was coming together exactly as she'd planned. As Madison reached the altar and took Jake's hands, I felt a moment of genuine sympathy for her. Whatever her motivations for this relationship, whatever calculations had influenced her decisions, she was about to discover that her dream wedding was built on systematic deception, financial crimes, and elaborate lies. The officiant, a distinguished gentleman who clearly performed many high-end weddings, began the ceremony with traditional words about love, commitment, and the sacred nature of marriage. His voice carried beautifully across the ceremony space, and his words were undoubtedly meaningful to many of the guests who believed they were witnessing a genuine celebration of love. Jake and Madison gazed at each other with apparent devotion, while their photographer captured every romantic moment for social media posterity. Their expressions suggested complete happiness and certainty about their future together. To any observer, they looked like a couple who had found their perfect match and were ready to build a life together. The irony was devastating. Here were two people who had constructed elaborate deceptions, who had built their relationship on lies and stolen resources, who had systematically deceived everyone who cared about them, standing before family and friends and making vows about honesty and commitment. The officiant continued with readings about love and partnership, about the importance of trust and communication in marriage, about the sacred commitment being made before God and witnesses. Each word felt like a mockery of everything Jake had done over the past months. Every lie he'd told, every dollar he'd stolen, every moment he'd pretended to love me while building a life with someone else. Marriage is not just a union of two individuals, the officiant announced, his voice carrying across the silent ceremony space, but a commitment to honesty, fidelity, and mutual support through all of life's challenges. Jake nodded solemnly, as if he understood and embraced these concepts, as if he hadn't spent months violating every principle the officiant described. Madison smiled radiantly, apparently believing she'd found a partner who embodied these values. If anyone knows of any lawful reason why these two should not be wed, the officiant continued with the traditional words that had probably never been answered at any wedding he'd performed. Speak now or forever hold your peace. This was my moment. Everything I'd planned for weeks, everything Tyler and Rachel had helped coordinate, everything I'd risked my emotional well-being to accomplish, came down to this single moment. I rose from my seat in the back row, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent ceremony space. I object. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Every head turned toward me with expressions ranging from curiosity to shock, to outright alarm. The string quartet stopped playing abruptly, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the gentle lapping of lake water against the shore. The photographer instinctively began capturing what was clearly becoming an unprecedented moment, while the videographer swung his camera toward the back of the ceremony space. I heard the collective gasp of 75 wedding guests suddenly realizing they were witnessing real drama instead of scripted romance. Madison's face went white with shock, her bouquet trembling in her hands as she tried to process what was happening. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror as he recognized me, his carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. "Ma'am," the officiant said, clearly flustered by this unexpected development, "on what grounds do you object to this union?" I began walking down the aisle with steady, measured steps, my voice carrying clearly to every corner of the ceremony space. "On the grounds that the groom is already engaged to another woman, me." The murmur that rippled through the assembled guests was audible and growing louder with each passing second. I could see phones being discreetly raised to record what was clearly becoming the most dramatic wedding Austin had seen in years. Social media notifications would be lighting up across the city within minutes. Jake found his voice first, though it cracked with obvious strain. "Emma, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in San Antonio." "Yes, Jake, I was supposed to be safely out of town while you married your other fiancé," I replied, continuing my steady progress toward the altar. "But plans change, don't they? Just like they changed when you decided to steal my money to pay for this venue." Madison was staring between Jake and me with growing comprehension and horror. Her perfect wedding day was collapsing in real time, and she didn't understand why or how. "What is she talking about? Jake, who is this woman?" I reached the front of the ceremony space and turned to address both Madison and the assembled guests. "Madison, meet Emma Rodriguez, Jake's fiancée of 3 years, the woman whose money he's been stealing to fund your relationship, and the person whose wedding date he stole for your ceremony." The gasps from the guests were louder now, and several people were openly recording with their phones. Ashley Blake was pushing through the crowd, clearly trying to determine how to manage this unprecedented crisis for her event planning business. "This is absolutely insane," Jake said, his voice rising with desperation and what might have been genuine panic. "Emma, you're having some kind of breakdown. You're clearly unstable. Madison, don't listen to her." The accusation of instability was predictable but still infuriating. Jake was trying to use gaslighting tactics in front of 75 witnesses, attempting to discredit me by questioning my mental health, rather than addressing the evidence of his deception. I pulled out my phone and approached the sound system that Ashley had thoughtfully provided for music and announcements. Let me share some evidence with everyone here today. I think it's important that all of you understand exactly what kind of man you're here to celebrate. The first recording I played was Jake's voice from our apartment just days earlier, his words now carrying across the ceremony space with crystal clarity. No, Friday works perfectly. We'll be out of town, so timing isn't an issue. Yes, she's completely unaware. No, I don't think there will be any complications. Jake's face went ashen as his own words echoed across the lakefront, his voice unmistakably his own, discussing plans to keep me away from Austin during his wedding to another woman. Several guests looked shocked, while others appeared to be processing the implications of what they'd just heard. That was Jake earlier this week, I explained to the stunned crowd, coordinating plans to keep me away from Austin during his wedding to Madison. But there's much more evidence to share. The next recording was from my phone call with Chloe Martinez, confirming details about the Thompson-Blake wedding, followed by clips from Marcus Photography discussing Jake and Madison's engagement photos. Each piece of evidence built on the previous one, creating an undeniable pattern of deception and betrayal. Professional engagement photos, I said, addressing Madison directly while maintaining eye contact. Taken while Jake was still engaged to me, still living in our shared apartment, still planning what I thought was our wedding. Tell me, Madison, did you know Jake was living with another woman when you posed for those romantic pictures? Madison's face had gone from white to green, and she was gripping her bouquet so tightly that petals were falling to the ground like snow. Her perfect wedding makeup was beginning to show stress, and her carefully styled hair seemed to be wilting in the Texas heat. Jake, she said, her voice cracking with emotion, tell me this isn't true. Tell me she's lying. But Jake was calculating now, his mind clearly racing, as he tried to determine whether he could salvage the situation through manipulation and charm. His expression had shifted from panic to strategic thinking, the look of someone who had talked his way out of difficult situations before. Emma, you're clearly upset about our relationship ending, he said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that I recognized from our worst arguments. But this isn't the appropriate way to handle your feelings. This is Madison's special day, and you're ruining it because you can't accept that we're over. Our relationship ending? I laughed, the sound carrying across the suddenly silent ceremony space with more bitterness than I'd intended. Jake, when exactly did our relationship end? When you applied for a marriage license with Madison 3 weeks ago, when you stole $5,000 from my bank account to pay for this venue, when you took engagement photos with her while wearing the watch I gave you for Christmas, or maybe when you researched apartments for you and Madison to move into together. The crowd was riveted now, phones recording every moment of what was clearly the most dramatic wedding crash in Lake Travis Resort history. I could see several guests texting frantically, probably sharing updates with friends who weren't present to witness this spectacle in person. Tyler appeared beside me with a folder of documents, his timing perfect as always. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the crowd, we have copies of bank records showing unauthorized transfers from Emma Rodriguez's accounts, photographs of Jake and Madison together at multiple Austin venues while he was engaged to Emma, and documented evidence of systematic deception spanning 6 months. He began distributing copies of financial records to nearby guests, each document clearly showing Jake's unauthorized access to my accounts, and the correlation between his withdrawals and payments to wedding vendors. Ashley Blake finally reached the front of the ceremony space, her event planner instincts kicking in as she tried to manage what was clearly becoming a public relations disaster. Security, she called out, though it wasn't clear who she expected to respond. We need to remove this disruption immediately. Actually, Ashley, you might want to hear the rest of this, I said, pulling out printed copies of marriage license applications, financial records, and social media screenshots. Because your sister deserves to know exactly what kind of man she's about to marry. I turned back to Madison, who was crying now, mascara beginning to streak down her carefully made-up face as she stared at Jake with growing horror and comprehension. Madison, did you know your fiancé was previously married and divorced under suspicious circumstances involving financial fraud? Did you know he specifically targets women in marketing and social media careers because we have skills and resources he can exploit? Did you know he's done this exact same thing to at least 2 other women before us? Madison's bouquet fell from her hands, white roses scattering across the ceremony platform as she processed what I was telling her. "Is any of this true?" she asked Jake, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake's mask was slipping now, his practiced charm giving way to desperation and anger. "Madison, don't listen to her. She's jealous and vindictive. We can work through this together." "Work through what?" Madison's voice was getting stronger, powered by growing anger. "Work through the fact that you're engaged to someone else? Work through the fact that you've been lying to me for months? Work through the fact that you've been stealing money from another woman to pay for our relationship?" "It's not what it looks like," Jake insisted, but his protestations sounded weak even to him. "There are explanations for everything. Emma is twisting the facts because she can't accept that I chose you." I addressed the crowd of guests, many of whom were recording every moment for social media posterity. "Ladies and gentlemen, you came here today expecting to witness a celebration of love and commitment. Instead, you're witnessing the exposure of systematic fraud, emotional manipulation, and financial crimes." I pulled out my phone again and played more recordings, including conversations I'd had with venue coordinators, photographers, and other vendors who had unwittingly confirmed details about Jake and Madison's relationship timeline. Jake Thompson is a serial deceiver who targets successful women, drains their resources, and abandons them when he finds better opportunities. He's not just unfaithful, he's a criminal who uses romance as a cover for financial exploitation. The photographer was still taking pictures, apparently realizing that this was becoming the most memorable event he'd ever documented, while the videographer captured every moment of Madison's emotional breakdown and Jake's desperate attempts at damage control. Rachel appeared from her position near the ceremony space, her detective credentials immediately commanding attention from the nervous crowd. "Mr. Thompson, Ms. Blake, I'm Detective Rachel Moore with the Austin Police Department. Based on the evidence presented here today, we need to discuss several potential criminal charges." The appearance of law enforcement completely shattered Jake's composure. "You can't arrest me at a wedding," he protested, his voice cracking with panic. "This is all circumstantial evidence. You have no right to be here. Actually, unauthorized access to financial accounts constitutes theft under Texas law," Rachel said calmly, producing her badge and identification. "Additionally, marriage fraud is a serious crime that carries significant penalties. We have documented evidence of your activities spanning several months." Madison finally found her voice again, addressing Jake with a fury that cut through her tears and shock. "You destroyed my life," she said, her voice rising with each word. "I moved to Austin for you. I gave up my life in Dallas. I planned my entire future around you. Everything was a lie?" "Madison, please let me explain," Jake started, but she cut him off. "Explain what? How you've been stealing from another woman to pay for our relationship? How you've been engaged to her while proposing to me? How you've been lying about literally everything for months?" The crowd was completely silent now except for the clicking of camera shutters and the quiet sobbing of Madison's family members who were processing the destruction of what they'd believed was their daughter's happy ending. "I loved you," Madison continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "I believed everything you told me. I trusted you completely. I defended you to friends who said you seemed too good to be true." Ashley Blake was frantically texting, probably trying to coordinate damage control for her event planning business, while vendors stood around uncertainly, unsure whether to continue working or pack up their equipment. "For those of you recording this," I said, addressing the phones pointed in my direction, "I want you to understand something important. This isn't about revenge or jealousy. This is about consequences." Jake Thompson spent months systematically deceiving everyone who cared about him, stealing money to fund his lies, and manipulating 2 women into believing they were building futures with him. I turned back to Madison, who was still crying but listening intently to every word. "Madison, you're not the villain here. You're another victim of his manipulation. But now you know the truth, and you have the chance to make informed decisions about your future." Jake made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. Everyone here needs to understand that Emma is mentally unstable, he announced to the crowd. She's been stalking me and Madison, breaking into private accounts, violating our privacy. This is harassment, and I'm going to press charges. Actually, Tyler interrupted, holding up recording equipment and legal documents. We've documented everything legally and ethically. Every piece of evidence was obtained through public records, social media posts you made publicly, or recordings of conversations in public spaces. We've been working with law enforcement to ensure everything we've done is completely legal. Rachel stepped forward again, her professional authority cutting through Jake's desperate protests. Mr. Thompson, you need to come with me for questioning regarding multiple potential charges including theft, fraud, and identity theft. Ms. Blake, you're not under arrest, but we may need to speak with you as a witness to his activities. As Rachel began leading Jake away from the altar, he looked back at Madison with what might have been genuine remorse, though it was difficult to tell whether he was sorry for his actions or sorry for getting caught. Madison, I'm sorry, he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet ceremony space. I never meant for it to happen this way. You meant for it to happen exactly this way, Madison replied, her voice steady despite her tears. You just didn't mean to get caught. You planned everything perfectly except for the part where your lies would eventually catch up with you. The wedding guests were beginning to disperse now, some staying to comfort Madison and her family, others leaving quickly while texting frantically about the drama they'd just witnessed. The photographers were still documenting everything, apparently recognizing that they'd captured something unprecedented. Ashley Blake was trying to coordinate with vendors about cleanup and cancellation procedures, while also managing family members who were demanding explanations about how this disaster had been allowed to happen. I approached Madison, who was sitting on a nearby chair while her bridesmaids tried to comfort her. Madison, I know this is devastating, but you need to check your own financial accounts immediately. If Jake had access to your banking information, you should verify that he hasn't been stealing from you as well. Madison looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Why are you helping me? I'm the other woman. I ruined your relationship. You didn't ruin anything, I said firmly. Jake ruined it. You were lied to just like I was. We're both victims of his manipulation. Over the next several hours, the full scope of Jake's deception became clear. Madison discovered that he had indeed accessed her accounts, though the amounts were smaller than what he'd stolen from me. Other guests came forward with stories about suspicious behavior they'd witnessed, but hadn't understood at the time. The resort staff handled the situation with remarkable professionalism, offering refunds and coordinating with vendors to minimize financial losses. Ashley Blake, despite the damage to her reputation, worked tirelessly to manage the logistics of canceling a wedding that was already in progress. 3 days later, I sat in my apartment reading news coverage of what the Austin American-Statesman had dubbed the wedding crash heard round the world. Video clips from the ceremony had gone viral across multiple social media platforms, generating millions of views and thousands of comments. Jake's arrest had been covered by local news stations, and his real estate license was under review by the state licensing board. His business reputation was completely destroyed, and he was facing multiple criminal charges that could result in significant jail time. Madison had handled the aftermath with remarkable grace, posting a thoughtful statement on her social media accounts about the importance of trusting your instincts and the danger of ignoring red flags in relationships. She'd returned to Dallas temporarily, but was reportedly planning to rebuild her life in Austin once the legal proceedings were complete. Tyler knocked on my door with takeout from our favorite restaurant and a bottle of expensive wine. "How are you feeling?" he asked as we settled on my couch. "Relieved," I said honestly. "Vindicated. Sad that it had to come to this, but satisfied that the truth finally came out." "Any regrets about how you handled it?" I considered the question carefully. No, Jake had months to be honest with me, months to end our relationship properly, months to stop stealing my money. He chose deception at every opportunity. He deserved to face consequences in front of everyone he'd been lying to. Rachel joined us an hour later with updates on the criminal case. Jake is cooperating with prosecutors in hopes of reducing his charges, but the evidence is overwhelming. He's looking at significant jail time and restitution requirements. What about other victims? We've identified at least 3 other women who were financially exploited by Jake over the past decade. They're all cooperating with the investigation. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected message from Madison Blake. She'd moved back to Dallas but was reportedly doing well, and had found work with a major fitness brand that appreciated her authenticity and resilience. Her message was longer than I'd expected. "Emma, I wanted to thank you for having the courage to expose Jake's lies. I know it must have been incredibly difficult to do what you did, especially in such a public way. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life, and you probably saved future women from becoming his victims. I hope you can find happiness and peace after everything you've been through." A month later, Jake pled guilty to multiple charges including theft, fraud, and identity theft. He received 2 years in prison along with requirements to pay full restitution to all his victims. His real estate license was permanently revoked, and his professional reputation was completely destroyed. The wedding venue coordinator, Chloe Martinez, reached out to offer me a significant discount on future events, explaining that my actions had helped them identify security gaps in their vendor verification process. Marcus Photography sent me copies of all the photos they'd taken during the ceremony, saying they were the most dramatic wedding images he'd ever captured. 6 months after the wedding crash, I was featured in a local magazine article about financial fraud awareness. The story had resonated with many people who recognized similar patterns in their own relationships, and I'd started volunteering with organizations that helped victims of financial abuse. A year later, I received an invitation to Madison's new wedding. She'd met someone in Dallas, a fitness industry executive who shared her interests and values. The invitation included a note. "This time it's real, and I owe that partly to you for teaching me what honesty in a relationship actually looks like." As for me, I kept my job, my apartment, and most importantly, my dignity. The experience taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to let someone else's lies become your reality. I'd learned to trust my instincts, value my worth, and demand honesty from the people in my life. The wedding that Jake had planned to destroy my life instead gave me back my power. I'd discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, friends who would support me through anything, and the knowledge that I could face any challenge with courage and determination. Jake Thompson had tried to steal my money, my trust, and my future. Instead, he'd given me the most valuable lesson of my life, that some fights are worth having, some truths are worth telling, and some consequences are worth delivering. The fairy tale ending wasn't the wedding Jake had planned. It was the moment I chose to stop being a victim and start being a force for justice. And sometimes, that's the best revenge of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.